and welcome to Talking Politics. Statistics show that in 2014, 6,122 suicides were registered in the UK. Today, we will be interviewing Samaritans.org, an organization that aims to reduce the suicide rates in the UK. Also, a company called Concentrix, a firm used by the government to cut tax credit payments, has received calls from suicidal clients. I have here with me in our studios today Jenni McCartney. She is the chair of trustees of Samaritans. Jenni, you're very welcome to our studios.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Now, every 6 seconds, someone contacts Samaritans for help. Let's watch a clip that tells us more about what Samaritans has been doing.
Captain 4 Focus 1505 service to London Paddington.
I'm Anna, and as well as being a volunteer in branch with Samaritans, I'm also involved in some of our outreach projects, including the Network Rail partnership. So we have 4 local stations which we work with. So the partnership is around reducing suicides at stations, but it's also about providing support to people who have been affected by suicides at stations, whether that's station staff or passengers.
I'm Maria, and I'm a listening volunteer and also director of the local branch of the Samaritans. We became involved with the Network Rail project in 2012 when we had 6 suicides at 3 of the stations that we support. And we went down and we were very happy to talk to the railway staff after the first incident.
My name is Margaret, and I'm the director of Swansea Samaritans. Well, the partnership between Network Rail and Samaritans was set up because of the high incidence of suicide on railway lines, and our branch decided from the beginning that we wanted to become involved in order to offer emotional support to people on the station.
Support can be provided very quickly, however, usually it's more appropriate to let the station staff restore a normal service and would normally go in the following day, where we'd still be able to speak to the same staff and passengers who were affected the day before.
We have developed links with British Transport Police and with Network Rail, and we've been attending meetings with different community leaders, different faith groups. The area that we cover is very diverse, and a lot of people don't know about Samaritans. We went one day and spent 3 hours giving out the Network Rail posters to every organisation, to the shops, the gyms, everywhere, just to raise awareness.
We have a very positive response from the passengers and from the staff. The staff have welcomed us and allow us to put our van in a convenient spot near the station where we can offer confidential emotional support to any passenger who chooses. And they've always told us how encouraged they are by our presence.
We've had a very good reaction from the public. We've also had referrals from station staff where we've been able to follow up with people who have been affected by an incident. And it's a good opportunity for us to work with Network Rail to provide our service and make sure that people are aware of where they can go for help.
The work that we're doing with Network Rail is, I would say, one of the most important things that our branch is doing.
This is an opportunity that we have grasped with both hands in order to get out there into the community and to meet people where they are, where they want to be.
And that clip shows us some of the things Samaritans.org is doing with the railways. Jenni, let's come to you. When was Samaritans founded and what are the charity's aims?
So Samaritans is 63 years old this year.
63?
Yes, we were founded in 1953 by Chad Vara, who was an English church minister. And he felt there was a need for people, from people he'd spoken to, he felt there was a big need for people to have somebody they could talk to and share difficult feelings at difficult times. And he set Samaritans up then. And suicide was still illegal at that point, so it was quite a risky thing to do in a way. It was a bit outside the norm, if you like. Our aims were then and still are that there will be a reduction in suicide in the UK and the Republic of Ireland where we operate. And we do a lot of things to try and work towards that. So part of that's the support services we offer on the phone lines, email and SMS. Another part of it would be education, so working in schools and businesses to try and educate people about the value of talking about how you feel and almost practicing doing it, because the British are very stiff upper lip and tend not to. In fact, I was probably like that before I became a Samaritan, you know. But and the other thing really is trying to work with local and central government departments to try and make sure that it's in their focus, because it's a big problem. Over 6,000 people took their own lives in 2014, and many more thought about it. You know, and every 6 seconds, as you said earlier, somebody contacts Samaritans. So.
Yes, and it shows that with what you're doing, it's possible to bring the suicide rates down in the UK. We're talking of over 6,122 people that took their own lives.
Yeah. So that number is quite stable over the last few years. It hasn't, I think it went down slightly last year, but very slightly. And I think that's a factor of the difficult times we're in at the moment with all the austerity that's been going on and people are finding life more difficult to cope with.
An example of the report that came out today is Concentrics, and it is a firm used by the government to cut tax credit payments, and they have complained that they have received suicidal calls from their clients as well.
Yeah.
So it's a problem that really needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we do work with organisations like Concentrics, either training their staff so they know how to cope when that happens, but also making sure they understand that they could signpost these people to Samaritans and somebody would be there who could help them cope. So it's a sort of two-pronged approach, if you like. We're trying to educate the companies and people in business who deal with problems like that on the phone, because it's very challenging if you've had no training to suddenly be faced with somebody who's actively suicidal. People, you know, if I hadn't been trained, I wouldn't know what to say. You know, so it's quite a challenging thing for people to have somebody saying they feel like that when they're talking to them about a business matter, if you like, which it would be in their view.
Yeah. How is Samaritans structured?
So the support services for Samaritans are entirely delivered and managed by volunteers. So we have 20,000 volunteers operating out of 200 branches in the UK.
20,000, that's
it's amazing.
A huge figure.
It is a huge figure. But we offer around-the-clock service, so people have to be there every hour of the day and night. So, and that's across the UK and the Republic of Ireland. There's a central staff who deal with supporting all that and making sure everything's in place for that to happen. And then some things like the research and the policy discussions are generally led by volunteers but managed by the central staff. We couldn't operate. We're all Samaritans. Some of us are just paid for it and some of us give our time to it. It's an amazing organisation, actually. I've been a volunteer for over 30 years, 32 years, I think, this year.
So you've enjoyed it so
far. I've been doing this, I haven't been chair for 32 years. Nobody's got that much energy. But it's an amazing organisation and it does make a difference. And I think that's what volunteering's about, giving your time. You have to feel you're making a difference, and I think we do.
And who is the patron of the organisation?
Our patron is His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. He's been patron for quite a few years now. And he's quite engaged with us. He does support us. If he's visiting a town, he'll go and visit the branch if he's got some free time. So he's very supportive and has sponsored a few events for us in the past.
Amazing. Now, how does the service work? And you've told us how many volunteers you have, but tell us more about the service. How do you carry out your work within the communities?
Okay. So as well as most of the branches are in bigger towns, if you like. So the phone system just delivers any calls that come in, and somebody does contact us every 6 seconds. So the telephone system delivers that call to the volunteer who's been waiting longest to take a call. So that means most people during the day we'll get through. There are times when the lines are extremely busy and it's not always possible to put somebody straight through. They also do email responses in the branches and SMS responses in the branches. So that's all done by volunteers who operate a shift system to try and make sure the cover's there when the demand is there. And that's not always easy to balance, because sometimes, you know, something will happen and it will trigger thoughts in people, so you get very busy. But it's always busy.
When it's very busy and people are not able to get through, or their calls are not put through, what other options do they have?
Well, we have a message that goes out with somebody saying that the lines are busy and to try again later. And they can use SMS, because there isn't such a, you know, quite quick a response needed on that, or email. And the other thing we'd like people to get the message of is that actually we have been trained to do this, but really if you say to somebody, are you okay, then you can open a conversation with them like that. So there's been quite a lot of publicity around that recently, with a young man on the bridge in London who a passerby came up and asked me if he was okay, and he stepped back and didn't take his own life. And sometimes it's as simple as that, just that intervention at that real moment of crisis can make the difference.
Tell us more about how Samaritans goes about to help people, because you're talking about your volunteers, and sometimes people can put calls through. Now, for those who are not aware of Samaritans and they are not even aware of what exactly you do, how can Samaritan help?
Well, we do a lot of work now trying to raise awareness of Samaritans, and I think the Network Rail campaign is a good example of that, where there's publicity in stations. Sometimes your ticket will have the Samaritans number printed on the back of it now from the train stations. We do a lot of work locally, because that's where the callers are. They're in the communities where we are, to have publicity and raise awareness of what we do in those areas. And things like this programme will raise awareness of Samaritans and what we do. So actually what we do is really simple. It's a very human act of caring, and it's one person and reaching out to another person who's in need at that moment. So it's not a complicated thing that we do, but it's very valuable in the community. And it is just, the more publicity we can get, the better, really. It's very important that we do make people aware of what we do. Actually, Samaritans has been our name for such a long time that most people have heard of Samaritans. Our challenge is making sure they understand what a difference it will make if they do call us, and encouraging them to think it's okay to call or to talk about how you feel.
Very interesting. And you also insist on confidentiality.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people calling me wonder, oh, is it going to be confidential, or would everyone know why I'm calling?
Yeah. So I think confidentiality is crucial, and we've had that in place ever since we started. And people are often sharing things with us that they've never told anybody about, and that there may not be a reason for them to be so worried about people's reactions, but that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about their family or friends or workmates knowing that they contacted us, or knowing what the problem is. And I think if we weren't offering a confidential service to them, then they would hesitate to call, and that hesitation might be very damaging. It's difficult sometimes, because you feel you want to reach out more actively and help people, but I think it would reduce our calls. People wouldn't trust us. And I think that trust we've built up with the community is really important if they're really going to share very difficult feelings. I mean, we don't talk about our calls, obviously, because it is confidential, but very often people have very challenging lives, and you talk to them for some time and they tell you the whole story gradually of their lives, and you can understand why they're finding it difficult to cope, because the things that they're facing are very challenging sometimes.
And your volunteers, because you have over 20,000 volunteers, you said, and they are all trained to identify people that are at risk of suicides.
Yeah. So they're all trained in open conversations, so opening the conversation and listening really carefully. And I think that's the most important bit about the training. It's this really focusing in on that call at that moment and putting everything else out of your mind, and looking for little hints and clues, because sometimes people who call us don't talk very much, or they find it very difficult to get started. So it's just those open questions. And I think what we do is very calming. It's a very calm environment, so we give them time to sort out the problems in their own heads. We haven't got the answer to all their problems, but we're giving them a chance to think them through and kind of get them sorted out. somebody described it to me once as a bit like the washing. When you put it all in the machine, it's all jumbled up. And that's what your head's like when life is very difficult. And when you take it out, you fold it all up and it's in a neat pile and in some sort of order. And I quite like that analogy, because I feel as if that's what we're doing. All the things that they were having difficulty with are still there, but they're in some kind of order, and they can perhaps begin to make some sense of it, which will make it possible for them to cope with it themselves.
So what do Samaritans hope to achieve in the next 5 years?
Well, we still very much hope that we will see a reduction in suicide, and we're doing a lot of work to try and improve on that. So we're working with government and with local authorities to get involved with their suicide prevention strategies and make sure that the things are in place that people need. Because actually, when they say it takes a village to bring up a child, and this is a bit like that, we can't do this on our own. You know, if we are taking over 5 million contacts a year, and they're calling us and having a moment in time with us and then have to get on with their lives, then the other things that surround them that could bring them support need to be properly in place so that they don't fall down a crack because there isn't somebody else to pick up on the practical sides perhaps. If somebody's having serious debt problems, then we're not debt experts, but other charities are. And you know, if they're not there and not properly funded, then they won't be able to pick up the pieces. So it's a bit about trying to work with the local communities so that the other charities in the area know what we do and are ready if we refer people onto them, and also that they will do the same thing. They'll refer people back to us who they are helping with the practical things, but they're not able to help with the emotional support.
Definitely. I mean, people calling you every 6 seconds, someone contacts you for help, is a huge responsibility here. Tell us a bit about the suicide rates. I mean, you've told us, which we know, over 6,000 people took their lives in 2014. What about the rate when it comes to children and teenagers and what's currently happening? So
I would say that we don't get very many calls from young people. I would guess they mainly call Childline, which is very widely advertised to support children and young people. Our concern, I guess, is really that the people who take their own lives are not predominantly men, but only 3 in 4 are men. 3 in 4 are men. Yeah, and the highest risk group is sort of middle-aged men, so 25 up to 55, something like that. And you know, they're a group that are probably less likely to talk about how they feel. I mean, it's a very sexist thing to say probably, but they're probably more likely to go down the pub and have a pint, and if somebody asks them how they're feeling, they'll say, I'm fine, you know. A bit like me when I go to the doctors, you know, regardless of the fact I've made the appointment. If you ask me how I feel, I always say I'm fine. And I think that's what you tend to do if you feel you're not in a place where you can share these things.
Amazing. So what steps have you put in place to really address this issue amongst the men if 3 out of 4 of people who take their own lives are men?
Yeah. So a few years ago we changed our advertising material so that we felt it would appeal more to men. So we had a Men on the Ropes campaign fronted by boxers who were working with the Network Rail campaign. Were able to get different publicity out there that made it so they're seeing faces that look like them. I think that's the big thing. If you're looking at adverts that have, you know, women and children, and you're a man in your mid-30s or mid-40s, you're not going to think it's somewhere you can go. So it's trying to make them realise that people like them have problems like they have and are finding it difficult to cope, and that they're not alone. So it's changing that focus, and I think the Network Rail campaign was a big focus of that. And the prison work we do actually focuses on that age group quite a lot as well, although there are women in prison as well, and we do operate in female prisons. But in general, the majority of it is a male population. So we are trying to focus our advertising differently, because we rely on people ringing us, so we have to make ourselves open and accessible so that they feel that we would understand what they're going to say and not feel alienated, although more than half of us are women, which does give us a bit of a problem from that point of view.
Let's look at the partnership work you do with other organisations. I mean, we've watched a clip about what you do with Network Rail. Let's talk about your prisons work, the work you do in the prisons. What is the reaction of the prisoners generally when it comes to Samaritans? The prison work is 25 years old this year, so there's some celebrations going on around now. I think initially it was very hard to get the prison population, both prisoners and prison staff, to really
engage with it because they didn't really understand what we would do, and they were very suspicious about confidentiality and things like that within prisons. But now almost every prison has some listener scheme going on. We select the prisoners to be listeners, so we go in and select and then train in the way we would train volunteers in branches, and then we go in once a week to support them. But in the meantime, they get called in to speak to prisoners who are struggling to cope. And I was at a prison recently, I was at Littlehay prison near Cambridge, who were having a bit of a celebration of the 25 years, and I met probably about 20 listeners there, and I was just amazed by their commitment to it and how they felt about it, and often saying that they had changed their lives as well. It had changed them, and they felt they were going to be different people when they came out of prison. So I think it would be quite interesting to do some research about whether listeners who come out of prison are less likely to reoffend than non-listeners. And I think there's some suspicion of them in prisons with the other prisoners. Sometimes prisoners call the free call number and speak to volunteers in branches, and certainly when I've spoken to them, I've always said, do you have a listener scheme in the prison? And there is a lack of trust, you know, that the information will get fed back to the prison officers, but it doesn't. And I think once they're reassured about that, they will start to speak to the people who are there on the ground and not having to wait till you can get access to a phone to ring, you know. So it's an amazing scheme that has probably been more successful than we ever dreamt it could be.
Wow.
You know, which is fantastic. So it is about finding connections that support what we want to do, but bring something elsewhere. I think another thing we do is training in the workplace. So we offer training in the workplace. In fact, we train Network Rail staff. I think it's over 10,000 Network Rail staff now in listening skills and how to identify somebody in the workplace who might be really struggling, and have that ability to go up to them and say, you know, things look a bit rough at the moment. Can I do anything? You know. And it makes a difference to the people who are asking the question as well as the people who are getting the question.
You've worked a lot with other organizations, and you say from time to time you work with the government. What would you like to see? What steps would you like to see the government take to bring down the suicide rates in England and in the UK as a whole?
So for me, it is the first thing I would like to see is proper suicide prevention work going on locally. And the prevention groups to be talking to us and working with us to try and put local plans in place so they can make sure that the support is there for people. And the other thing is investment in mental health services, which are, you know, it's on the news all the time, they're very underinvested in. And they keep saying they're going to put more money in, and I'm sure there are plans to do that. But it would be really good to see that come in place and enable everybody to have a bit more support on the ground where they really need it.
What made you become a Samaritan volunteer? Let's start with you. You've been a volunteer for over 30 years.
Yeah, I know. I lived abroad for quite a while, and I came back when I was in my mid-30s. And I was thinking, actually, I've bought a house now, I'm quite settled down, you know, I think maybe I could do some voluntary work in the local area. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't really know much about Samaritans at the time, and I certainly wasn't thinking about Samaritans, but the local paper came through the door the same night I started thinking about it, and it had a leaflet for Samaritans in it, and I rang up and asked a bit about it, and they invited me along for an interview the next night, and they were just about to start a training course, and they accepted me on the course. And I'm not sure why. Well, I suppose just because they asked at that point, and it seemed like once I'd heard about it, they were obviously very enthusiastic about it, so once I'd heard about it, it seemed like a great thing to do. But why I still do it, because like many people, I do know somebody in my long distant past who took their own lives, and sometimes I think I still do it because of her. You know, not because I think I could have stopped her, because I didn't know how to at that point, but I think if she had had access to something like Samaritans, she would not have, you know, she might not have, you can never know, but she might not have. So the reason I'm doing it for so long is Helga, really. But the reason I started was nothing to do with that, because I hadn't made that connection at that time, because I didn't know what we can do.
Amazing. And tell us about your experience as a volunteer. I mean, you have over 20,000 volunteers in the UK. Let's listen to you. You've been a volunteer for over 30 years. Obviously I would love more people to volunteer to be Samaritans, but I think volunteering in general just brings something much
more to the individual who's doing the volunteering than it does to the people they're doing it for. I mean, they might not feel like that, but I feel I've got far more out of being a Samaritan than I have given to it. You know, I'm not sure I feel quite like that now. I'm chair of Samaritans because this is a 3-year appointment, and I'm a very busy person now. But I'm getting some great new experiences, and I still love it. And I think it's about doing something you really believe in. You know, we work because we get paid, and I feel more passionate about Samaritans than I did about my job, which I won't say who I used to work for, but I feel more passionate about this. So I think if you've got working on something you're passionate about, it makes a big difference to your life, the rest of your life as well.
People at home, someone out there who is saying, I'm in so much crisis, maybe the debt crisis or whatever it is. What word do you have for them about Samaritans? What do you want them to know about Samaritans?
I think Samaritans care about you, and they care about all the people who contact them. And I think it's really important to remember that there is always somebody there who will give you some time and space to think through the problems and help you work through. But we leave the control with you. It's down to you. We're not going to try and tell you what to do, and we're not going to judge you. It's a very accepting organisation. We accept people for what they are and how they present themselves to us. We're not suspicious in any way of why people contact us. And we think we can help. We do it because we care. And I think that's why it works, because it's people who care somehow. There's no evidence for this, but I feel that's why it works, because we care about what they're doing.
And just before we go, your patron, His Royal Highness, Prince Charles, what do you think he would like to see about Samaritans?
I think he would like to see suicide rates go down, and he would like to see us be more successful, if you like, in that sense. He's a great proponent of volunteering in general, and I'm sure he would like to see us have more volunteers. And the volunteers we've got are amazing, but if we had more volunteers, we could do more. So that would be my big call out, really. If you're thinking about this, go and find out about it, because with more volunteers we do an amazing amount of work, but we could do more if we had more people.
Thank you so much, Jenni. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, this is Talking Politics, and we have been interviewing Jenni McCartney. She is the Chair of Trustees of Samaritans. Samaritans is an organisation that is aimed at reducing the suicide rates here in the UK. In 2014, we had over 6,000 suicides registered in the UK, and reports say Concentrix, a firm used by the government to cut tax credits, has received suicidal calls from clients. Now, if you've got any information, you can send emails to info@loveworldtv.co.uk. Enjoy the rest of our programs.